Hey everyone, hope you're having a great start to your week. Thanks for tuning in to an all-new episode of Mondays with Mike, where we break down the top men's basketball headlines from around the league. Mike, as always, great to see you here in the ADN studio. Let's start off looking back to some of last week's games, some big wins and exciting finishes. But first of all, UConn seems like maybe they're starting to find their stride. Jalen Adams having a couple good back-to-back games, and they came up with a big win at home against UCF.
The UConn Huskies had a huge home win versus the UCF Knights. It's safe to say whenever these two teams play, we need to watch. These two teams do not like each other. There was a pre-game scuffle in warm-ups and then another one in the post-game handshake line. It's always a gritty, physical game when the Huskies and the Knights match up. At times it wasn't pretty offensively. Neither team shot the ball very well, but UConn came in with a great game plan. They forced Taco Fall to guard the ball screen almost every single possession, and Jalen Adams was the catalyst. He was terrific in the half court, especially in that ball screen situation, forcing Taco Fall to make decisions. Adams finished with 13 points and 5 assists. Christian Fatal led all scorers with 18 points, and Terry Larrier chipped in for 13 for the Huskies. The Knights still have not won at UConn since joining the American Conference, but those games, every time those two teams match up, it's always a physical, fun game to watch.
Well, Mike, another team that was looking for a win was the Temple Owls, and they came up with it on the road in Dallas, in a place where it's not easy to pick up a victory. They snapped SMU's 33-game home court winning streak. How big was that win for Fran Dunphy and his squad?
Well, it was huge because they snapped a streak of their own. They came in and lost 5 in a row. Fran Dunphy came in with an awesome orchestrated game plan to beat SMU at a place in which you just don't beat the Mustangs. More importantly, Quentin Rose was fantastic. He finished with 23 points and made big shot after big shot for Temple. He is the key for the Temple Owls' success leading into conference play. Quentin Rose has to play good. There were 3 things that led to an Owls win, in my opinion. SMU was only 9 of 17 from the free throw line, and that game was decided by 2 points. The Owls out-rebounded the Mustangs by 7. It just felt like Temple wanted it more, and rebounding is that great effort stat to determine. And Obi Anachiona played like an all-conference player. He had 16.7 rebounds, 2 blocks. That's the type of player that we expected all year for Obi to be.
Well, Temple picked up that big win on the road, and then they headed back home to Philadelphia to take on a Memphis team who I think was safe to say was feeling it last week. The Tigers picked up 2 big wins and another heartbreaking loss for Temple on their home court, but it was Jeremiah Martin who was the star for Memphis this week, and he picked up this week's American Player of the Week accolades.
Well, Memphis had that big win over Temple where they hit a 3 at the buzzer by Kareem Bruton Jr., but congratulations by Jeremiah Martin. I think it was pretty obvious he was going to get Player of the Week. He was one of the best scorers in the country in the last 3 games. Martin has been playing the best basketball of his career in that 3-game winning streak for the Memphis Tigers. Unequivocally in the zone in just 3 days after scoring a career-high 28 points in a win over Tulsa, Martin followed it up by netting 31 in their 96-89 win over Tulane, and then he just drops 26 in that thrilling win versus Temple. Not since December of 2011 has a Memphis Tiger player scored at least 27 points in 3 straight contests. That mark was set by Will Barton. He's the only player in conference averaging 18 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, and 2 steals for the season. In fact, there is only one other player in the country that has that same stat line, St. John's guard Shamari Pons. He's literally doing it all for the Memphis Tigers.
Well, Jeremiah Martin, certainly a familiar face and veteran on this Memphis roster. But Mike, I have to ask you, who has stuck out to you as maybe an unsung American hero so far this year?
Yeah, I'd like to go back over to Dallas, and SMU's sophomore guard Jimmy Witt has been fantastic all year, and nobody's talking about him. He gets lost in the conversation because we talk a lot about future NBA point guard Shake Milton and the human highlight reel Jeray Foster. But Witt is very quickly becoming a star in Dallas. Witt is averaging double figures in scoring this year at about 10 points per game, but it's all the little things that he does that go unnoticed, in my opinion. He's almost at 4 assists per game, which is top 10 in the conference. He's 4th in conference in field goal percentage, shoots over 56% as a guard, no less. And he's 3rd in the conference in steals per game. He takes care of the basketball as well. He's got a 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. Jimmy Witt is going to be a great player throughout the next couple of years for SMU.
Mike, who is a player that people are talking about, possibly a early Rookie of the Year contender?
Yeah, I'd like to go down to Orlando for UCF and Cesar DeJesus, the freshman point guard. He has been really, really good these last few weeks. He has 3 Rookie of the Week honors for the American Conference. And one of the big things I'd like to talk about is been the absence of B.J. Taylor, preseason first-team all-conference point guard. With B.J. Taylor being out for almost the entire season, Cesar DeJesus has stepped in and take over some of the leadership duties for the point guard position. He's averaging about 13.5 points in those wins over Memphis and Temple. And one of my favorite things about DeJesus is that he's always in attack mode. He plays with a fearless mantra when in transition. And when his outside shot improves, he is going to be a problem for a long time for UCF. I love Cesar DeJesus' game and his ability to break down his defender.
Well, sort of keeping with this same trend, we started last week talking about early Player of the Year contenders, and the first name that you brought up was Rob Gray Jr. I think it's safe to say he continued to make that case this week. But another guy that we sort of expected to be in this conversation was Wichita State's Landry Shamet. Mike, why is Landry a contender for the league's most valuable honor at this point in the year?
Well, he's not just the best point guard in the American Conference. He's one of the best point guards and players in the country. Just strictly, he is absolutely outstanding to watch. He's a coach's dream. But let's get some stats out of the way first, just so you can kind of understand before we take a deep dive into what makes Landry Shamet so special. He's 5th in the country in three-point field goal percentage. He leads the team and conference in assists per game on the Wichita State team that's 8th in the country in assists per game. And as a point guard, he shoots over 55% from the field, including over 50% from the three-point line, in which he leads the American Conference. He has a great assist-to-turnover ratio, and here are the 3 main things that make him truly special. Number 1, his ability to play with great pace. You never feel like he's under pressure. You never feel like he's out of control. Number 2, he makes the right play no matter what. You can't call him necessarily a scoring point guard, and he's not exactly just a true setup man either. He's not a robot. He makes great plays no matter what defense he's actually facing. And number 3, as just a sophomore, he is a true extension of Coach Greg Marshall on the floor. You never feel like they're running the wrong play, the wrong set. You always feel like Landry Shamet understands time, score, and possession, and that's why he's one of the best players, not just in the American Conference, but in the country.
Well, Mike, I think a great way to close out the show is by talking about some of the big games coming up this week, the ones that fans are going to want to circle on their calendars. And speaking of Landry Shamet and Wichita State, they have a couple pretty big games to look forward to this week.
Huge games in the American Conference this week, but to go off for Wichita State, they face Houston and SMU. It's a Texas trip for Wichita State during this week. The Shocker faithful have to be careful. You can't just roll over and say, we blew out Houston earlier in the year. This Cougars team is playing great basketball. They are very good on the offensive end, and I highly doubt they will be unmotivated to get some revenge against Wichita State. And then SMU. Wichita State has the Mustangs at home. SMU needs this win badly. They are struggling offensively, and you better believe that Coach Jankovic is coming into Wichita State to try and upset the Shockers. I'd also like to go down to Orlando and look at the game for Cincinnati versus UCF. Huge game in Orlando Tuesday night. The Bearcats are looking for redemption from last year's loss to UCF in Orlando. It's a very, very difficult Cincinnati team. because they can score this year, almost 80 points per game while holding opponents to under 60. But so does UCF. Cincinnati and UCF are number 1 and number 2 respectively in scoring defense in the American Conference. That game is going to be a brutal grudge match, and could this be the return of BJ Taylor, who still has not come back to play for UCF with a foot injury? Another huge game Saturday, noon, CBS. UConn hosts number 1 Villanova. The Huskies are red hot, winners of 3 conference games in a row. Noon games are historically very difficult for road teams, and the Huskies playing great at the right time. They want to shock the world, beat the number 1 team in the country, Villanova. You better believe that Storrs is going to be absolutely bananas for that game.
All right, Mike. Well, just to close out the show, I have to put you on the spot for a second. Who are you putting on upset alert this week?
Two teams, Villanova and Wichita State. I really think that UConn at home is very difficult to beat, so the Wildcats better be careful. And that's a big win for UConn. Could be a catalyst game for them for the rest of the year. And Wichita State, I'm telling you, you can't discount the Houston Cougars. That win, you almost have to erase. That Wichita State's win over Houston, they blew them out. It was completely unfair. But the Houston Cougars are shooting lights out from the basketball. Rob Gray is playing some of the best offense of his entire career. Houston's going to want to come in for redemption. Wichita State needs to be ready.
Hey, look at that. Your 2 early contenders for Player of the Year, Rob Gray and Landry Shamet, battling it out in a big conference game. Well, Mike, as always, thank you so much for your insight this week. It was great to have you on the show, and we'll see you back here next week.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
All right, and that's all we have for today. As always, thanks for tuning in to our all-new episode of Mondays with Mike. We'll see you next week.